At the time of filming this video, my students at the University of North Alabama are just a few weeks away from performing their end of semester jury pieces. In a bunch of my lessons I had recently, after hearing them perform their jury piece, I spent some time giving them some advice on how to spend the last couple of weeks getting ready for their jury piece and how to have maximal success. Each time I shared this advice, I started to realize more and more that I had skipped this bit of advice for myself when I performed with Malice Toward None with the Alabama Symphony Orchestra in early April. So in this video, I'd like to share a little bit with you about how I prepared for With Malice Toward None, what this important step was that I skipped, and how that ultimately affected me in my performance. I remember watching the premiere of this piece. It was done by the National Symphony Orchestra with John Williams conducting and Chris Martin, who was on the soundtrack for the movie Lincoln, as well as who this particular setting of With Malice Towards None is dedicated to, was the trumpet soloist. I was in the Indianapolis Symphony at the time, and I remember wondering if this piece was going to become some sort of a staple of the trumpet repertoire and if I was ever going to get to play it myself. Anyone who has performed this piece knows what I'm talking about when I say that the difficulty of this piece is quite deceiving. When you look at the page itself, nothing looks too difficult. There are no fast notes, there's only a couple of high notes, there's plenty of rest. It just doesn't seem like it's going to be that difficult of a piece to tackle and to learn. However, when I was on stage performing, the real difficulty of this piece became clear. The solo starts out with the trumpet by itself, which can be a nerve-wracking experience, and throughout the entire piece, it's pretty thinly orchestrated when the trumpet itself is playing. So even though this piece isn't as technically challenging as the Gregson trumpet concerto that I did with the orchestra last February, in some weird way, it was so much more stressful to perform. So because this piece didn't look super difficult at first glance, I didn't really treat it with the same level of preparation that I did the Gregson, and I actually don't remember what I did. I didn't write a program for it or anything. All I remember is that I started about 4 weeks in advance. For the first few weeks, I did the same thing I normally do, where I broke the piece into different musical sections, and then I slowed the tempo down on those. Even though it's not a fast piece, I still sometimes like to slow things down, if for no other reason to kind of trick my brain into thinking, okay, this is gonna be easier than normal, and that way I can start to prioritize learning how to navigate some of the difficult parts of the piece. In the case of With Malice Towards None, instead of having fast technical passages and kind of the normal idea of difficulty, you replace it with some really large intervals that you have to be able to traverse with ease. There is one section that kind of goes on for a little while, and it can be kind of taxing, and there's a high B in there, which can be, I guess, nerve-wracking if you're feeling tired or something. And overall, for me, the most difficult part of the piece is just the amount of control you have to have and the kind of beauty you need to bring forth in your sound at all times. Throughout these 2 weeks, what I would do is I would take each section and I would practice it 2 or 3 times at, like I said, a slower tempo, and then I would just do my normal deliberate practice operation. Each day for the first 2 weeks, what I would do is take each section and I would practice it 2 to 3 times, depending on how it felt, at a little bit slower tempo. I think I dropped it maybe 6 to 10 beats per minute on those early days 1 and 2 and 3. I would play a repetition and then assess what things I wanted to be better. I would usually pick 1 or maybe 2 things to improve upon. I wasn't worried about solving every single issue. And then I would just kind of come up with a solution that I thought might work. So if there was a large interval and I wasn't nailing the interval, I might slur smaller intervals working my way up, or maybe I would just kind of work on the slur to try to get a sense of what do I need to do to make this larger leap. And then after that, once I thought I found a solution, I would put it back into context on my second or my third repetition to see, did this solution work? After a couple of days, I would bump up the tempo just a little bit closer to the goal tempo, and I would just rinse and repeat this process. I recognize it probably wasn't 100% necessary to go slower for this. Like I said, it being a slow piece already, but I didn't think it was gonna hurt anything for me to go a little bit slower, and I really feel it resulted in me having a lot of confidence of knowing how I was gonna get through this piece and what I wanted to do. I even memorized it. The week before the first rehearsal is when I began to run through the piece, trying to get a feeling for what it felt like to go from beginning to end and try to remember all the things that I wanted to do. And this is the part of the process that I think I messed up. The way that I view preparing for solo performances or auditions or recitals, whatever kind of big thing that you want to do, is that the most efficient and effective way you can do it is to do it in stages. Each stage has its own goal, and you want to focus in for some period of time on the particular goal and try to really nail that step down, so when you move on to the next step, you're sort of building a house, like brick by brick, and the bricks are staying there. So when you're done, you have this fully completed product. The last phase or stage, whatever you want to call it, of performance for me is called the peaking phase. And it's going to start about 1 to 2 weeks before your performance. And this is where you're going to start trying to get lots of run-throughs going so that you can sort of break away from the section, sort of nitty-gritty type of practicing and begin remembering what this thing feels like and the whole scope of the whole piece. The problem I ran into during this preparation is I didn't take advantage of the most important part of it, which is to shift your mindset from the nitty-gritty, getting down into the weeds and trying to solve every problem, pulling yourself back out and remembering the big picture, remembering that performing is an opportunity to share a part of yourself with an audience, and that perfection isn't necessary, but making a musically compelling statement is. I'm a really critical person in the practice room, and when I'm in that mode, I'm never satisfied, and it's gotta be great, and it can always be better. And like I said, I felt like I missed the opportunity to pull myself out and remember it's not about me. It's just about sharing what I have with the audience. At this point in my story, you might be asking, I hear you when you say that this part of the process is important, but is it really that important? Why is it such a big deal? Well, the end result of my preparation process is that I believed I played well, but I just wasn't satisfied. It wasn't a good feeling. I got a lot of good feedback from my colleagues and some of the audience members that were there, and I was really trying in the moment to lean on that as an indicator of success, but I just didn't feel successful. I just kind of felt like I could have done better. I knew I could have done better, and that feeling kind of held over me like a dark cloud and just wouldn't let me go. The point of this story is to say that when I was up there performing, I was not in a headspace of sharing what I had with the audience. I was in a headspace of being critical and thinking about every little nitty-gritty detail, and being in that headspace basically meant that no matter how well it went, I probably would have been able to do better, and because of that, I wasn't going to be satisfied. One of the things I find myself struggling with is the balance between trying to continually improve with the reality that I'm often not going to 100% play up to whatever my potential may be. I wanted to share this realization with you because I really believe that to play at a high level, you have to spend time digging in, solving problems, getting over every single detail, turning over every stone, and it can be demoralizing at times, especially when you have lots of problems to solve. But I don't think we can stay there long term. It's exhausting to be in that headspace, and I don't think performing with that mindset will ever lead us to our best performances that we could possibly have. They say you either win or you learn. In this case, I'm trying to lean on the fact that people said that I did good and they liked my performance, and so it was successful and I can say that I won. But also, I was reminded of this valuable lesson that I'm sharing with you, so it looks like I learned something too. Even though I didn't document my process for this particular solo that I played with the ASO, I did document the way I prepared for the Gregson Trumpet Concerto a year ago, and if you haven't seen that, go ahead and click the link on the screen and check that out if you are interested.